Welcome to Skillful Living and Artful Life. And today I am joined by the extremely talented and creative and gracious Christopher Korey. He is now the creative director for Stefano Bemer. And prior to that, he was the creative director and co-founder of Christopher Korey Collective. He is also known throughout the city for the fact that he is one of the very few real estate brokers, independent real estate brokers in this great city. So, without further ado, Sir Christopher Korey.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for this honor. That was quite the intro. I hope I can live up to even a small portion of that.
You already have. That's the thing.
Boy. Then,
That's
all right,
already
I'm
have.
out. I'm good. See you.
We're done.
Yeah, we're done.
All right. So when I was doing some research, because we've known each other a while, and you have been interviewed by magazines, online magazines, you've been photographed by magazines, and you've done YouTube videos, podcasts, I mean, everything.
The world is clearly in a dark place, but yeah, okay.
Well, I mean, you really took social media by storm, and completely organically, you weren't even trying to, but which is even nicer, actually.
Thank
that
you.
it just happened. Couldn't have happened to a nicer person.
Thank you.
But there's one young gentleman, and I'm going to mention him again later on, but there's one young gentleman by the name of Zane, and I think it's Hamoun, New York City Pulse.
Yep.
And you were schooling him quite well, which I thought was great because he's much younger. And so I really enjoyed it. But you made this comment, and it's you have two lives, the life you learn with and the life you live with after that. That leads me to my first question. When I heard you say that, it resonated with me on many different levels, and I'm sure it resonates with a lot of people out there as well, going through different stages of life. And so what do you think, or who do you think influenced you the most to have that type of wisdom to know that, or did you get to know that later? But who is your biggest influencer coming up?
Oh, God. Honestly, I've been influenced by so many things and so many people. It would be hard to pick out one. I think growing up here in New York had a huge influence on me because, A, you grow up very fast. You learn things and see things that maybe you shouldn't, but you do, and it influences you in many ways. Obviously, my parents had a huge influence on me. We grew up in New York, and my parents were sort of, especially for the time, very progressive in how they raised us, in that they never really treated us like children. We were very much adults at a very early age. I mean, I was sitting at the bar at PJ Clark's when I was, 7 years old in a little blue blazer in a smoke-filled room with
Hanging out with the
people.
fellas.
Totally. And it was, I think the experiences, more than any single person, probably influenced me the most. And I have to say, living in New York and being exposed to so many things, I think you're influenced by what you see, what you hear, more importantly. I think you obviously learn much more by listening rather than talking. And if you're sort of smart enough to listen, you pick up on a lot of things that, and more importantly, you learn what not to do rather than what to do. And sort of by process of elimination, you get to a certain simplification of what you want to be, how you want to behave, what you want to project, how you want to live, all those things. You sort of refine it, you edit it. So again, back to what I had told Zane, it's you learn a lot in that life, and then it's how you apply what you've learned, hopefully, at a certain age, and you move on.
Right.
You know,
That's the idea, right?
it
Gain
has to
some
be.
wisdom.
Otherwise, I'm not a huge fan of wasting time. People, because I'm in a luxury business, they always ask me what I consider to be luxury, whether it's clothing or your watch or your home or your car. They always sort of reference those things. And I try to explain to them it's not the things. Our most precious luxury is time.
Mm-hmm.
It's the one thing they're not making any more of. So it becomes your most precious commodity. And how you spend it is crucial to what your life is going to be. So unless you grasp that concept and you're chasing a new car, a new dress, a new bag, a new this, you're wasting a lot of what is truly most precious.
Truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've started to say to people, I've got a lot more time behind me than I have in front of me.
Oh, well, that's a whole other discussion. When I always tell sort of young guys who come to work for me, I said, we're in different positions and you have a different mindset. When you realize, like I do, I'm coming out of the locker room for the second half and the first half is behind you and you got 2 quarters left,
Mm-hmm.
you have a much different sense of urgency.
Yep.
Than you do when you were younger. When you were a kid, summer lasted like 6 months, right? You were like, it was endless.
And you still didn't want to go back to school.
And you still didn't want to go back to school. But it was endless. I mean,
Right.
summer lasted forever. Now, you take the garbage out and summer's gone. Mm-hmm. So you're much more cognizant of time, and time plays a crucial role as you move on in life, and you have less of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
True. You've done a lot with your life, so that's good. You've got a lot accomplished. And what I found amazing was, and I was thrilled for you and Carl, was that you didn't have the atelier shop for very long before you got acquired by Stefano Bemmer.
Yeah.
which
I would
was
love to tell you
huge.
that everything in my life had been methodically planned out and strategically thought about.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that's happened sort of has happened in spite of myself. There was no map and no real direction per se. It's all been sort of instinct and what I felt was authentic to me.
Mm.
And the rest, I truly believe this sort of takes care of itself. If you can stay authentic to what is truly in your gut has an amazing track record. It's never steered you wrong. Whether you listen to it or not, completely different story.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime I haven't listened, that's where, things went off the rails. But in times that I did, you have to sort of believe things are just going to work out if you stay true to that. But nothing that has happened in my life, including even when we got acquired, was ever planned. We weren't doing what we were doing to sell it. We were doing what we were doing because we loved it and we wanted to provide something that wasn't there in the marketplace. And, the business even started unintentionally.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Carl, and Carl can be a persuasive guy,
Yeah.
and he's the one who talked me into it. And so that in and of itself, it was not something I ever thought about doing, something I planned. Yeah, it was a sort of a passion of mine.
I had asked you about it the first time we corresponded.
That's right.
I had said, would you make anything for women? Because there's nothing out there
Yeah.
that I really love aside from hiking gear. But that's different.
Well, yeah, but that's essentially it.
Yeah.
I mean, from a business standpoint, that's what you look for, right? What isn't there? And you always have to think.
And also what I really like, which is the classic style with a modern twist.
Exactly. And I always thought of it as the buyer, as the consumer. What would I want that I can't find?
Mm-hmm.
And that's essentially how the collection started and how everything organically grew. It's just it started. We were entering a time where there was less of it and less to choose from, which is sort of part of the problem with fashion per se, is that it's very trendy and it changes its mind and along with culture and what's popular rather than what is timeless. So timeless was what I was after, and fashion was what was happening.
Right.
And so when the scales get tilted too far one way or the other, you see an opportunity to maybe balance them out a little bit. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of balance, how do you balance all of this? I mean, you've got...
I don't.
Yeah. No.
The balance in today's world, maybe 10 years ago, something like that, before the advent of the phone situation, maybe you could. It was much easier to balance work. It was much easier to balance work and your personal life when I had an answering machine.
Right.
Okay?
Yes.
Things were much more defined.
Right.
You weren't reachable all the time. You
Right.
weren't connected to technology all the time. The thing that's happened with the phone is you're on 24/7. And, we have clients who are in different time zones and they're, corresponding with you in the middle of the night and what.
So you don't sleep?
So, no, the sleep is something I've read about it in books, but I don't actually
It's a
do
very,
it
very
myself.
vague memory.
And I think sleep has changed. I think for all of humanity, in that because you're always cognizant. Now there's a big push to leave your electronics in another room when and some people subscribe to it and some people don't, and some people can't. And there's so many different things.
What do you do? Do you leave your electronics in another room?
I do, actually.
Good. It's better for sleep.
It is, and also at some point you have to turn off. It's hard enough now these days to turn off your own mind.
Yep.
That I think it's crucial that whatever you can do to, it's an overused term, but unplug these days, I think is kind of extremely important.
That's so funny. Yeah. Well, because the next question was going to be, what is it that sustains you? I mean, for lack of a better word, spiritually. Like, how do you find yourself being sustained and maintaining a sense of self? And because boundaries are important in life, and it's not only good for you, but it's good for the people around you to respect your space. And so what is it that you do to sustain you?
Well, I'm fortunate in a lot of ways, but I'm fortunate also to be surrounded by some pretty amazing people who really try to keep me in check in that area. But I have to say, again, through a haphazard set of circumstances, I was the last guy on Instagram. I didn't want to be on Instagram. I did not want to be in front of a camera. Ironically, through all of this craziness, a beautiful byproduct of what happened is I found or sort of discovered a love of photography. And when I was a kid, I was very into drawing. I was very into photography, and then I sort of gave it up as I entered the real world.
Yes.
And ironically, because I had to get somewhat decent with a camera again for Instagram and our website, and it sort of reignited, I would say, a passion for art. I won't pigeonhole it to photography, but being an artist and creating things. And so now my form of therapy and how I unplug is I do a lot of photography, fortunately not of myself, but of New York, of street photography, of other people when they need portraiture done or some sort of artistic thing. And that it's grown into something I don't know that I would ever want to necessarily make it a business, and people are always after me to publish my stuff, a book, which I don't know,
And an
maybe
art show.
maybe someday that'll happen, and if I'm fortunate enough to make that happen, and other than you and my sister show up, I'll be happy.
I'm sure a lot of people will show up.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
I don't know, but it is therapeutic for me to stay in touch with a sort of organic beauty that is not business related. It's something that fulfills your soul rather than your wallet, and having that in today's world and not being so consuming of media and things of that nature. It's the best way for me to stay semi-plugged in and unplugged completely.
Yeah, and you also provide people with inspiration, not just from your photographs. I mean, I didn't know that you were on Instagram when I had read an article, and I was on Instagram, but I was putting on my hikes, all the hiking I was doing.
Right.
I was living in Northern California at the time, so that was my favorite thing, to go to the cliffs and all that stuff. But
there you go.
And also taking pictures, because there's so much beauty there. But one of the things that drew me to your Instagram page, first of all, was that you could wear any color on the palette, which is really...
You're far too kind. I'm a little concerned about your prescription right now, but
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But also what got me was the photography, was how you would capture the lighting, how you would capture an actual stoplight, and that...
Thank you.
That was because I'm into minutia and details. And so that was also, it was like, oh yeah, of course he looks great. What is going on in this photo? How did he get the lighting like that?
Thank you.
And I think there's something there. That you
Well,
can
I
do
think,
that
listen,
maybe
I mean,
you're already doing it.
That was from a business standpoint and a product standpoint. So just like anything else in life, if you're going to dive into something, you really need to apply yourself to do it to the best of your ability. And you need to learn what you need to learn, and then you need to put your own spin on it. And once you have a foundation of sort of the technical aspects of it, then phase 2 is, okay, what are you trying to say in this genre? And visually, at the time, it occurred to me that there has to be somewhat of a strong visual, because when people do this, you sort of have to make them stop and put out something interesting or whatever. As far as the text of what I would write, that was born out of my love-hate relationship with social media. And it is a for the bane of my existence in a lot of ways, and in other ways, I think it's an amazing tool to do a lot of good.
Yes.
So I think social media is an amazing business tool.
Yeah.
Something we've never seen before, certainly in my lifetime. I mean, the generation now, they've grown up with it, so they know, but
it's old hat to them.
Our generation, if I told you, and you and I have had this discussion.
Yes.
If I told you 20 years ago that you would be the creative director, CEO, photographer, editor, and copywriter of your own magazine,
right,
that had a potential readership of $1 billion, and it's free.
Right.
you would look at me like I had three heads.
Right.
But here it is in its digital format. And you have that thing. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's a tool you have to use. But, and here's the big but. Socially, what it does, there's a price to pay for the amazing business tool that it is. And I think the price we pay is socially, especially for the young people of this world. And when I first got on there, what I saw was a medium of lack. I felt like there was a lot of young men and young women going on, being told what to look like, being told how to behave, being told what's popular, but more importantly, seeing a life that they thought they would never have. And seeing things, I'll never have that car, so it's everything that they lack, which I found extremely destructive and shameful in its own way, that the people who were promoting it didn't give a second thought to the repercussions of what it might do to them. So
Yeah.
I said, okay, if I'm going to do this thing, and I begrudgingly did it, I mean, really, I must say, and I didn't want to, but if I was going to have to, then I wanted to promote a positive message. And the most positive message that I could promote, which was authentic, was that if a monkey like me can do it, so can you, because you're probably twice as smart, twice as good looking, twice as motivated, all those things. And look, here's a perfect example of not even wanting to do it, but doing it in their own way and keeping it authentic to them. If you can do that, I think the worst term in social media actually comes from Instagram, which is followers. I cannot stand the term I don't want you to follow me.
Right.
What I want you to do is join me. And if you can join me on this journey, you'll find your own way. I'll find my own way. We'll do it together. It'll be great. You don't need to be told what to do, because you're not me. It's not going to work out the exact same way for you that it did for me. You need to find your own way to make it work and be inspired by a knucklehead who maybe made it work, and then take it from there.
Definitely made it work. I mean, the proof is in the pudding, as they say.
I've been very fortunate, and it was a lot of good people around me, and without those people, none of it would have happened. So it's definitely not a one-man show.
No.
No.
It's a collective.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, hence Christopher Korey Collective, which is now, so what is going on with that? Are you going to keep the name Christopher Korey now that Stefano Bemmer is in the picture?
Yeah, so we got acquired by a brand that has a very strong Italian heritage.
Right.
And of course, we were humbled and honored that they would even consider someone like us, you know.
It's a perfect match, though. It's like
in a lot of ways
nice.
It is, because it's so uniformly different and yet share some of the same principles about quality, about, you know, in a world of fast fashion, we wanted to offer something
that lasts.
Something that you can have 20 years, not that you can have 20 minutes.
And
so
it's not made for like pennies on the dollar and you're paying.
It is not. I mean, we try to
100.
use the finest. I mean, if you go into our store in Florence, you can actually watch a lot of what you have purchased being made by craftsmen. I mean, it's an amazing experience. You have a new appreciation for what it takes to make something of quality.
I'm wearing a piece.
Yeah, you are indeed, and you're wearing it well.
You designed this.
You did, and your color, which is even.
And he picked everything. He picked everything about it. So.
Because it's you. That's the most important thing is
Yeah.
designing things, not that I love, but that are going to be amazing on you, that represent you in the most authentic way. Right now, what we're trying to do is figure out we have two very different sort of clienteles for two different aesthetics. And what we're trying to do now is figure out, do we keep them separate in their own way and service both? Or right now we're working on sort of a hybrid design between the two.
Yeah.
It's sort of, it's hard to describe, but I would say if Steve McQueen was playing James Bond and he lived in Florence, this is what he'd look like.
And I can see that.
You know, it's
I
sort
can
of
totally see
it's a jumbo jambalaya.
I think you
kind
put
of-
on a jacket
yeah,
just a few days ago, and I was like, "This is different."
yeah. We're
Like,
trying
I could
to
totally tell
push
the
a
lapel
little more.
and the stitching.
Yep,
It
yep.
all looked different.
Yeah, we're trying to sort
draped
of
differently.
And you have to do a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of things, and I'm completely OCD. So tweaking things, you know, you can tweak it till I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, but
Yes, you are.
you know that, you know, you can, but you don't want to get to that point where it's paralysis by analysis, right? You
Getting
at
too
some
precious.
totally at some point you have to like let go, and that's part of the Italian heritage too, is that British inspired suits are modeled after military uniforms. So everything's very precise and very sort of strong, and whereas the Italians are much more about the imperfections, and it's the comfort and the relaxed nature of it.
Right.
And what we're trying to do is sort of mash
Marry
those
them.
very
Yeah.
different styles together
Right.
into a more organic and hopefully somewhat new aesthetic that is, I think, much more in tune with how people actually live today. You know, since the pandemic and even before that, things were changing. And so people have a different sort of work ethic now and work modality and how they live and how they work and so it's built more for today's lifestyle than maybe 5 years ago or 6 years ago when we first started. Yeah.
Okay, so that leads me to a series of other questions. You had for a little while been making clothes for women.
Yeah.
Will that ever happen again?
I think it will, only because, first of all, the demand for it is so strong. You know, right before we got acquired, we were talking about really broadening out our women's line and really sort of fleshing it out to a point where, with the same sort of things in mind, I was sort of looking at it in what I didn't see out there right now, and thinking about, you know, to this day, I sort of worship at the altar of Ralph Lauren because, for many reasons, but something that he did very well, which I have yet to see be done again, is he could do Savile Row or cowboy better than anyone. I mean, and it was just the aesthetic of it, which is two wildly different things that, but to do both well is extremely difficult. And he also used his wife, Ricky, as sort of his muse of what his idealized woman would be. And if you take those two concepts, what's not there, what you can do well in two different genres, men's and women's, and if you sort of have a muse of what you would like to see out there, not in any specific one person, but in general, that would be the foundation of the women's line. And it would be something that I, in my own personal opinion and aesthetic, don't see enough of out there now. That I still think there's a place for an old sort of Hollywood glamorous sort of where everything was very defined. Women look like women and men look like men. And
everything was tailored to fit your body, not in tight,
no,
but it was tailored to fit your body.
100%.
I have vintage pieces from before I was born
Right.
that I still keep, because
Yeah.
where am I finding that unless I come to you and Carl?
Right, and we
you make
recreate it
for
right.
me, right? And everything that I think of in clothing for women.
But it's plays into a much broader picture in that I live my life. This is an overused term, but I live my life and I see life in a very cinematic way.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't, to me, life pretty boring and
Mm-hmm.
pretty dull.
Mm-hmm.
But when something is more cinematic and more of a heightened version of itself, it makes you much more inspired to delve further into it and experience more of it.
Right.
So who wouldn't sign up for that? I would in a minute. And that sort of that sort of old Hollywood aesthetic
Love it.
plays into that. So
But there's not a lot of people that think that way. I have to tell you. Even
No,
you and I are in the same generation.
absolutely. Listen, I don't know that there's a market for it, honestly, but I know you are.
You can count me in.
Appreciate you.
Yeah.
But I don't know. But I know that anything less than that, I feel like, does the woman a disservice. It sort of dumbs them down in a way that's very average. I mean,
and not flattering.
No. So the whole thing, a woman's form, I don't care what size you are, I don't care whether it's 16 or 2, is beautiful in its own way. And it's about accentuating that beauty and all its curves and all its beautiful lines rather than covering them up so that you look just like the woman, or in this case girl, sitting next to you.
Or not wearing much at all.
That's the other end of the spectrum, something that I'm not interested in getting into.
I don't.
No.
I think the first time we corresponded, I said I would love for you to make clothes for women because I go into a store and I'm like, okay, so I'm either going to look like, trashy,
Yeah.
or, in my opinion, or I'm going to look like I'm wearing a paper bag.
We've gotten to that place, unfortunately.
And I don't have the body shape for flouncy. I have a body shape for fitted.
Some people do, and listen,
but some people do,
and I don't want to force anybody into you have to be this way or that. You have to be what's authentic to you.
Right.
But it has been my experience in a couple of trips around the sun that the majority of women look better in clothes that enhance them rather than water them down.